All right, everyone, get ready for this one because we are going deep today on a deep dive into Vancouver. Mountains meet the sea. Yeah, stunning scenery. The whole thing, right? That postcard perfect image. I get it. You've probably seen the pictures 1,000 times. But here's the thing. The sources you sent, they go way beyond the surface level. We're talking unexpected wildlife encounters, indigenous stories woven right into the city, and a creative pulse, well, let's just say you might be surprised.
You know, it's really interesting. What's fascinating about Vancouver is that its beauty, it's not just like a superficial thing. It actually shapes the city, its identity. Like you've probably heard Vancouver called the, what is it, the sushi capital of North America.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun fact. I'll give you that. But did you know that like that whole sushi thing, it's actually tied to a wave of Japanese immigration way back in the late 19th century. So these immigrants, they brought their culinary traditions with them. And then you combine that with Vancouver's access to all that incredible Pacific seafood. And well, you can see how they got a sushi scene, unlike anywhere else.
You see, that's what I'm talking about. This is a deep dive, not just a quick little look.
Yeah.
Okay, so sushi is definitely on the menu, but what about the iconic Stanley Park? I mean, it's a whopping 1,000 acres. That's huge. It's practically bursting out of the city limits. And the seawall, oh man, the seawall, the longest uninterrupted waterfront path in the whole world. Come on, that's got to be more than just a pretty little stroll, right?
Oh, absolutely. The seawall, it's the perfect example of how Vancouver, like intentionally, they wove nature into their urban design. It's not just some tourist attraction. It's part of daily life. People commute on it, they exercise, they meet up for coffee, and it's all with the ocean and the mountains right there as their backdrop. You know, it's a really powerful reminder that nature isn't just something you go visit on the weekends. It can be, and it is in Vancouver, a constant presence.
Okay, I'm starting to get what you mean about Vancouver being more than just a pretty picture. But let's talk about, I want to talk about those totem poles in Stanley Park. I know they're super significant, but honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Yeah, well, they're not just standing there for decoration, that's for sure. Those totem poles, specifically, they're located at Brockton Point. They're like storybooks, but carved in wood. They were created by First Nations artists, and each one tells a piece of the history, the legends, the beliefs, all of the indigenous peoples who have called this land home for centuries. So, for example, you might see a pole depicting a thunderbird. It's a powerful creature in a lot of Northwest Coast indigenous cultures. And it's not just a mythical figure, it represents like a whole set of beliefs and values that are still very much alive today.
So it's like a direct link to the past, but it's also a reminder that this history, it's still present in the city. The sources mentioned the Talking Stick Festival. Is that an example of this living culture?
Oh, absolutely. The Talking Stick Festival is a phenomenal example of how Vancouver celebrates its Indigenous heritage. It's not just a museum exhibit, it's dynamic, it's contemporary, it's a showcase of Indigenous storytelling, music, dance, and art. Just to give you an example, last year they featured a performance called Raven. It was by a dance troupe called Dancers of Demela Hamid, and they blended traditional masked dance with modern theatrical techniques. It was incredible. And, you know, it's not just about preserving the past. It's about Indigenous artists pushing boundaries and evolving their art forms right now in the present.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. From ancient stories to cobblestone streets, our next stop is Gastown. The sources describe it as a place where time travel meets trendy. Is that just marketing speak, or is there some truth to that paradox?
You know, it's one of the most fascinating things about Vancouver. It's this ability to hold on to its history while constantly moving forward. Gastown, with its steam clock and Victorian architecture, I mean, it has undeniable historical charm, but it's also a hub for cutting-edge fashion boutiques, art galleries showcasing experimental work, restaurants pushing culinary boundaries. I mean, you could wander past a building from the 1880s and then stumble upon a shop selling avant-garde clothing designs. It's this constant juxtaposition that makes Gastown so intriguing.
It's like they're not afraid to let the old and the new coexist and maybe even feed off each other a little bit. I love that they mentioned gassy Jack Dayton in the sources. Apparently this talkative Yorkshireman is the reason the area is even called Gastown. It's those little details that make history come alive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Gassy Jack, he's a reminder that Vancouver has always been a melting pot of personalities and cultures. People drawn to the edge of the world, each leaving their mark on the city. But it's not just about nostalgia. Gastown, like Vancouver itself, embodies this constant tension between preserving heritage and embracing change. It's a thread that runs through the entire city.
All right, my stomach is starting to rumble just thinking about our next stop. Granville Island. Overflowing with food at the public market, artisan shops, and studios. It sounds like a full-on sensory experience, doesn't it?
Oh, Granville Island is a feast for the senses, that's for sure. And it's another great example of Vancouver's talent for blending seemingly disparate elements. You have this bustling marketplace with vendors hawking fresh produce and seafood right next door to a working boatyard and then a theater company rehearsing down the street. And did you know that Granville Island is also home to Granville Island Brewing, one of Canada's first microbreweries?
No way. See, this is what I love about these deep dives. Those little nuggets of knowledge that totally shift your perspective. So, craft beer, alongside artisan cheese and hand-blown glass. Granville Island is sounding more and more like my kind of place.
It really is a microcosm of Vancouver's multiculturalism. The diversity of food vendors, the styles of art on display, even the languages you hear spoken as you wander through the market, it all speaks to Vancouver's openness and their willingness to embrace different cultures.
Okay, so we've covered mountains, sea, a thriving sushi scene, thanks to some entrepreneurial immigrants, a 1,000-acre park that's more like an extension of the city itself, indigenous stories etched in wood and dance, a time warp that's also a hotbed of contemporary creativity, and now a foodie paradise with a side of craft beer history. I'm sensing a theme here. Vancouver is full of surprises, but everyone talks about whale watching in Vancouver. What about the land-based wildlife? Surely it's not all just squirrels and pigeons, right?
You'd be surprised. What often gets overlooked is that Vancouver isn't just close to the ocean. It's practically nestled against vast forests and mountains. This means you can encounter black bears, bald eagles, and even the occasional cougar roaming within city limits.
Wait, hold up. Cougars, as in mountain lions. Okay, that's a little unnerving, but also kind of amazing. I mean, you don't expect to hear about big cats sharing space with a bustling city.
And that's exactly what's so remarkable about Vancouver's approach. They've managed to design a city where wilderness can exist right alongside urban life. It's a delicate balance that very few cities achieve. But this coexistence, it raises some intriguing questions. How do you maintain that balance? Are there compromises that have to be made? And what happens when human interests clash with the needs of the natural world?
Whoa, that's some serious food for thought.
Before we let our imaginations run wild with all those cougar sightings, let's circle back to this idea of coexistence. It really gets to the heart of what makes Vancouver so unique.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about protecting pockets of nature within the city. It's about weaving nature into every aspect of urban life. But how does that actually play out in practice?
We'll take a look at Vancouver's commitment to sustainability, for example. They've set some pretty ambitious goals, for reducing their carbon footprint and promoting green living. And it's not just empty promises either. They're actually investing heavily in public transportation, creating these extensive bike lane networks and implementing strict green building standards.
So it's like they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly, and it seems to be working. Vancouver consistently ranks as one of the most sustainable cities in the world. But what's even more interesting is that this commitment, it isn't just coming from the top down. The people of Vancouver, they seem genuinely passionate about sustainability and environmentalism. It's like part of their identity. You see it in their lifestyle choices, their consumer habits, even their political activism.
It's interesting you mentioned that because as I was digging through the sources, I noticed that they didn't just focus on the postcard perfect side of Vancouver. They also delved into the city's history, which, like any city, has its share of complexities and even some dark chapters. It seems like Vancouver has gone through quite a transformation over the years.
Absolutely. Vancouver has a fascinating history shaped by waves of immigration, economic booms and busts, and this constant push and pull between progress and preservation. But what's striking is how the city has managed to retain a sense of its past while still embracing change. Think about Gastown, for example. It's a historic district, sure, but it's also a thriving hub of contemporary culture and commerce.
And it's not just Gastown. The sources highlighted how Vancouver's multiculturalism is woven into the fabric of the city. From Chinatown to Granville Island and beyond, you see this incredible tapestry of cultures.
Right, and it's this diversity that gives Vancouver its unique energy and vibrancy. You can taste it in the incredible variety of food, see it in the art scene, and hear it in the multitude of languages spoken on the streets. It's a city that genuinely seems to welcome everyone and celebrate their stories.
We touched on this earlier with the totem poles and the Talking Stick Festival. But I'm curious to go a bit deeper into Vancouver's indigenous heritage. The sources make it clear that this isn't just some historical footnote. It's a living presence that shapes the city in really profound ways.
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that Vancouver is located on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And their presence isn't just confined to museums or cultural events, it's woven into the very landscape, the names of places, and the stories that are told about the city.
So how does Vancouver go beyond just acknowledging this history? How does it actively honor and showcase Indigenous heritage in a meaningful way?
Well, for starters, there's the Museum of Anthropology at UBC, which houses a world-renowned collection of Indigenous art and artifacts. But it goes way beyond that. There are numerous Indigenous-owned businesses throughout the city. Galleries showcasing Indigenous art and cultural centers where you can learn about Indigenous history and traditions firsthand. And of course, there are events like the Talking Stick Festival, which we mentioned earlier, that celebrate contemporary Indigenous arts and culture.
It's amazing to see a city that's so committed to recognizing and celebrating its Indigenous roots. It's something that a lot of other cities could learn from. I'm starting to realize that this deep dive is giving you a whole new perspective on Vancouver. It's a city that's constantly evolving, pushing boundaries, but always with a deep appreciation for its past and a commitment to a sustainable future.
Well said, and I think that's what makes Vancouver so captivating. It's a city that embraces its complexities and contradictions. It's a place where you can constantly discover something new, whether it's a hidden pocket of nature, a groundbreaking art exhibit, or a culinary experience that tantalizes your taste buds. It's a city that challenges you to think differently about urban living.
You know, it's funny, we started this deep dive talking about Vancouver's reputation for breathtaking scenery. And yes, the natural beauty is undeniable, but what we've uncovered is so much more than just a pretty picture.
It's true. Vancouver is a city with depth, character, and a spirit of innovation. It's a place where nature, culture, and urban living come together in a truly remarkable way. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Vancouver, its undeniable magnetism for artists, entrepreneurs, and those who simply crave a different pace of life. What is it about Vancouver that fosters this sense of creativity and possibility?
That's a great question, and one that deserves a deep dive of its own. But before we wander too far down that path, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. Vancouver is a city of contrasts, a place where ancient traditions meet cutting-edge ideas, where towering skyscrapers share space with lush forests, and where a deep respect for the past fuels a passionate embrace of the future. But this delicate balance, it doesn't happen by accident. It requires constant effort, thoughtful planning, and a willingness to confront difficult questions.
You're absolutely right.
We've seen how this city, it embraces nature, it honors its past, and it welcomes this amazing mix of cultures. But let's be real for a second. No city is perfect. So what are the challenges, the things lurking beneath this, what seems like an idyllic surface?
Well, one of the biggest issues facing Vancouver, and it's a theme that comes up a lot in our sources, is affordability. Vancouver is a desirable place to live, which ironically has made it a very expensive place to live. Housing prices especially, they've just skyrocketed in recent years, and that puts a strain on people who've lived there a long time and makes it hard for new people to settle down.
Yeah, it's that classic double-edged sword. A city thrives, it becomes this magnet for talent and investment, but then that very success drives up the cost of living, and then it pushes out the people who gave the city its unique character in the first place.
Exactly. And this issue of affordability, it's really closely tied to Vancouver's growth as a tech hub. Like we touched on this earlier, but Vancouver's become a big player in the tech industry. It's attracting startups and big tech companies alike.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a good thing. More jobs, more investment, more innovation. But I'm guessing it's not that simple.
Right. While the tech boom has brought economic benefits, it's also contributed to rising housing costs and more competition for resources. It's created a situation where tech workers who are paid a lot can afford to live in the city, while artists, service workers, and other essential people in the community are being priced out.
So how is Vancouver dealing with this tension between economic growth and affordability? Is it even possible to find a balance?
That is the million-dollar question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. The sources highlight a bunch of initiatives that aim to address the housing crisis. Things like increasing the supply of affordable housing units, implementing stricter regulations on short-term rentals, and exploring new models of community ownership.
So it sounds like they're at least trying to tackle the problem head on. But I imagine it's a constant uphill battle. Cities are always evolving, and the challenges they face are rarely static. What else is on Vancouver's horizon?
Another challenge that emerged from the sources is the ongoing need to balance urban development with environmental sustainability. We talked about Vancouver's commitment to green living, but as the city keeps growing, those commitments will be put to the test.
It's that classic push and pull again, right? The more people you have, the more strain you put on resources, on infrastructure,
Yeah.
on the very environment that makes a place like Vancouver so appealing.
Exactly. And it's not just about reducing carbon emissions or preserving green space. It's also about adapting to the effects of climate change that are already happening. Things like rising sea levels and more extreme weather events.
Wow, this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey, from breathtaking scenery and culinary delights to complex social and environmental challenges. Vancouver is clearly a city of many layers. So, what's the takeaway here? What can we learn from Vancouver's approach to urban living, both its successes and its struggles?
I think the main takeaway is that Vancouver shows us that a city can be both beautiful and ambitious, that it can prioritize economic growth and environmental stewardship at the same time, that it can honor its past while embracing the future.
It's a reminder that there's no one solution that fits every city. It's about constantly adapting, innovating, and having open and honest conversations about the kind of future we want to build. Vancouver, with its stunning backdrop and its mix of cultures and ideas, it offers a unique perspective on what that future could look like. It's a city that isn't afraid to experiment, to push boundaries, and to challenge the way things are. And while it's not perfect, it offers a glimpse of what's possible when a city embraces a holistic vision, one that recognizes how people, the planet, and progress are all connected.
Well said. And maybe that's the most valuable lesson we can take from our deep dive into Vancouver. It's not about finding perfect solutions, it's about embracing the complexities, asking tough questions, and constantly working towards a city that is both livable and inspiring.
I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Vancouver. It's a city that's left me feeling both energized and like I need to think more deeply about things. And I don't know about you, but I'm suddenly craving some sushi. Until next time, keep exploring.